The human brain is, it's generally a remarkably efficient search engine. Like if someone asks you a really specific parameters-based question.
Right, like a trivia question.
Yeah, exactly. Say they ask, what did you have for dinner last night? Or what year did you graduate?
Your brain just pulls it right up.
Instantly. Yeah. Your neurological filing system retrieves that data. Boom, no problem.
Yeah.
There's this very clear cognitive boundary.
Yeah, it's a closed loop.
Right. But then you step into a job interview or, I don't know, a first date or some awkward academic mixer.
Oh, the worst.
And someone leans across the table, looks you dead in the eye, and delivers the 4 most terrifying words in the English language.
Tell me about yourself.
The universal dread. I mean, it is the ultimate open-ended query.
It really is.
And instead of retrieving data, your brain's search engine just completely crashes. You suddenly forget where you were born, what you do for a living.
If you even have a personality at all.
Exactly. It's like an existential crisis disguised as an icebreaker.
Well, the paralysis happens because of cognitive load. I mean, when you're hit with, tell me about yourself, the other person isn't actually asking for an exhaustive chronological biography.
Right. They don't want to hear about your 3rd grade spelling bee.
Exactly. But our brains, they process the prompt as this massive demand to summarize the entirety of our human experience, our values, our history, our aspirations.
Come into like a cohesive 30-second elevator pitch.
Right. It lacks all conversational guardrails. You're forced to simultaneously decide who you are, who the other person wants you to be, and, what specific data points will actually bridge the gap between the two.
Which usually results in a very panicked, stammering list of random facts.
Yeah, I like bread and I have a sister.
Exactly. But for this deep dive, we have a stack of source material that completely re-engineers this broken dynamic. And it's actually fascinating where it comes from.
Yeah, it's not a psychology textbook.
No. Interestingly, the material is a transcript from an English language learning program. It features this prolonged, highly detailed conversational model between 2 individuals, Emma and John, who are, demonstrating how to answer this exact question.
And looking at conversational models designed for language learners is incredibly revealing.
How so?
Well, because the material has to bridge cultural and linguistic gaps, it has to strip away the unwritten, implicit social rules that we usually stumble over.
So it makes the subtext into text.
Precisely. It makes the architecture of human connection entirely explicit. Emma and John aren't just reciting vocabulary. I mean, they are executing a highly strategic masterclass in personal curation.
Okay, let's unpack this. The mission for today's deep dive is to deconstruct our exchange to really understand the underlying framework. We're looking at the sociology and the psychology of first impressions.
So that you, listening at home, never have to sweat this prompt again.
Right. So the transcript begins by establishing the physical environment. Emma and John start with their names, their origins, and a very specific breakdown of their immediate living spaces.
Yeah, they set the geographical stage before attempting to wade into anything abstract.
So let's look at Emma first.
Okay, so Emma is 25. She's from Canada, and she describes her current environment as a bustling, noisy metropolis.
Bustling and noise.
Right. She lives in a compact apartment, but she specifically notes that it's tastefully arranged and has a lovely view.
Which is an interesting detail to throw in.
It is. And more importantly, she labels the relentless energy of her environment as invigorating.
Invigorating. Okay, then we get the stark contrast with John.
Yes.
He's 28, originally from the U.S., and he exists in an entirely different spatial reality.
Totally opposite.
He lives in a quaint, tranquil small town. Rather than an apartment, he occupies a modest, detached house. And he makes a point to mention a garden that he's quite fond of.
What's fascinating here is the immediate deployment of environmental psychology.
Oh, I like that term.
Yeah, they're using physical space as a proxy for their internal baseline. When Emma says she finds a noisy metropolis invigorating, she's communicating her relationship to external stimuli.
Meaning she likes a lot going on.
Exactly. She thrives on high-frequency input, movement, a certain level of chaos. Whereas John, by highlighting the tranquility of a small town and his fondness for his garden, he signals a preference for stability, observation, downregulation, quiet growth.
See, I look at this kind of like the character creation screen in a complex role-playing game.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like, you don't just pick a character model, right? You pick a starting region, a background, your base stats.
Mm-hmm.
By defining their environments so clearly, city versus country, compact apartment versus detached house, they're establishing their baseline operating frequencies.
Right. the environment you choose to inhabit, or at least the way you choose to frame the environment you find yourself in, it speaks volumes about your cognitive and emotional needs.
Right, because Emma doesn't just say small apartment. She says tastefully arranged with a lovely view.
Exactly. That suggests an outward-looking personality that values efficiency and aesthetics, while a detached house with a garden suggests an inward-looking personality that values cultivation and personal boundaries.
But okay, let me challenge the utility of this in a real-world scenario.
Sure.
If I'm standing at a networking event or sitting in a seminar, does the person across from me actually care if I live in an apartment or a house?
You think it sounds a bit trivial?
It sounds dangerously close to real estate small talk. Like if I say, hi, I live in a compact apartment with a nice view, the instinct of the listener might just be to nod politely and look for an excuse to walk away. It doesn't seem inherently gripping.
Well, if it were just a recitation of square footage, you'd be right.
Right.
But the purpose of sharing these physical parameters isn't to discuss property values. It's to create a contrast that invites a specific type of follow-up.
A follow-up? Okay, how does that work?
So when John mentions his modest house and the garden he tends to, he's offering an architectural detail that stands in direct opposition to Emma's reality.
Because she has no garden.
Exactly. Emma, the apartment dweller, immediately reacts to the novelty of his space. She marvels at the idea of having a personal garden because it's something she completely lacks.
So the contrast is the engine of the conversation.
Precisely. If John simply said, I live in a town, it's a conversational dead end. There's nowhere to go.
Cool. I live in a town too.
Right. But by adding the texture of the garden, he provides a hook. He allows Emma to compare her daily physical reality to his. They're suddenly exchanging mental images.
Her high-rise view versus his soil and plants.
Yeah. The mundane detail of housing becomes an invitation to explore how the other person moves through the physical world.
It bridges the gap. You aren't just this, disembodied voice in an interview chair anymore. You're a person standing in a specific room, looking out a specific window. And once that physical grounding is established, the transcript naturally progresses into the next layer of identity, which is vocation and lineage.
Right, because once the geography is set, the listener's brain automatically looks for the next anchor point. Like, what are you doing in that space? And how did you get there?
So we learned that John is an English language instructor.
But he doesn't just state his job title.
No, he doesn't. He attaches an emotional modifier to it. He explicitly states that he is passionate about his profession as an educator.
And Emma does the exact same thing.
Yeah, she's a university student majoring in fine arts. But she specifies her focus on drawing and painting and frames it not just as coursework, but as a challenging yet fantastic creative outlet.
We're carefully intertwining their labor with their internal values. Employment or academic status can often feel, incredibly dry.
Super dry.
I am an accountant.
Right. But by attaching words like passionate or challenging, they're signaling their work ethic and their emotional investment in their daily routines. But the true strategic depth in this section emerges when they link these vocations back to their family ecosystems.
Oh, the family details are incredible.
They are so robust. So Emma reveals that her entire family is artistically inclined. Her mother is a published author. Her father is a physician.
Quite the power couple.
Seriously. Her older brother, Tom, is 29, and her younger sister, Sarah, is studying music with a focus on piano performance.
And then John counters with a lineage built around service and creation.
Right. His mother works in early childhood education.
And his father is a chef who owns his own restaurant, making what John calls sublime food.
Sublime food. I love that adjective.
It's a great word. And this is a practical application of narrative identity theory.
Narrative identity theory.
Yeah, so human beings understand the world through stories. When we meet someone new, they often feel like a character who has entered the plot halfway through a movie.
Like walking into a theater an hour late.
Exactly. We don't understand their motivations. By sharing their family backgrounds, Emma and John are providing the prologue.
It's world building. It's exactly like setting up the lore of a cinematic universe.
Yes.
When a new hero shows up on screen, you need to know their origin story for their current actions to carry any weight. Like when Emma says she's studying fine arts, it might sound like a standard college major.
Sure, thousands of people study fine art.
Right. But when she contextualizes it with a mother who's a published author and a sister who plays piano, her degree suddenly makes profound sense. It's no longer an isolated choice.
No, it's the natural continuation of a family culture that clearly prioritizes creative expression and intellectual pursuit.
Right.
The sociological term for this is habitus.
Habitus. Spell that out for me.
It's the deeply ingrained habits, skills, and dispositions we possess due to our life experiences, primarily shaped by our upbringing. So John's profession as an educator is entirely contextualized by his mother's career in early childhood education. He was raised in an environment that valued teaching and nurturing.
And his dad, the chef, provides a different type of nourishment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
John's current identity is a direct reflection of a household built on service and provision.
You know, I think people often hesitate to bring up their families when answering, "Tell me about yourself."
Oh, absolutely.
There's this assumption that you need to be a completely self-made, independent entity, especially in professional environments. You think, well, they asked about me, not my parents.
Right. I want to stand on my own 2 feet.
Yeah. But listening to this analysis, cutting out your family history, actually strips you of your credibility. It removes the foundation that makes your current pursuits believable.
It forces the listener to just take your word for it rather than seeing the evidence of your development. And conversationally, mentioning family provides incredibly rich material for the other person to grasp onto.
Totally.
Like when John mentions his father as a chef, Emma immediately utilizes that detail.
She asks about the experience of having gourmet, sublime meals at home.
Yes. It opens a sensory doorway. She isn't just asking about his dad's resume. She is inviting John to share a sensory memory from his childhood.
Which completely lowers the stakes of the interaction while simultaneously deepening the connection. We've moved from, what is your job to what did your kitchen smell like growing up?
Which is a masterful transition.
It really is. And it perfectly sets up the next phase of the transcript. They've covered the heavy foundational aspects, where they live, how they make money, where they come from.
The macrostructural elements.
Right. Now they pivot to the things they actively choose to love, the emotional anchors.
They transition into passions, preferences, and pets. They move from the macro structure to the micro aesthetic choices.
The pets are introduced first, and the descriptions are incredibly deliberate. Let's look at John's dog.
Okay, so John has a dog named Max.
Max is small, brown, perpetually happy, boisterous, and intensely affectionate.
And Emma has a cat named Luna.
And Luna is black and white, serene, elegant, maintains a dignified independence, and is described as a professional napper.
Notice how the animals serve as avatars for their owners' temperaments?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They perfectly mirror the environments they established in the first section.
Let me see if I follow. So John, who lives in the tranquil, quiet small town, introduces boisterous, affectionate, active energy into his life through his dog.
Exactly. He needs that spark of chaos.
And Emma, who thrives in the relentless, noisy, invigorating metropolis, anchors her home with the serene, independent, quiet energy of her cat.
Yes. The pets act as regulating mechanisms for their environments.
That cross-balance is fascinating. They're using the animals to show how they manage their own emotional equilibrium.
It's brilliant.
And it doesn't stop there. The transcript puts them through an absolute gauntlet of basic preferences: colors, foods, hobbies.
Let's talk about the colors.
Right.
So John likes the color blue because it reminds him of a clear sky.
And Emma likes green, specifically citing the foliage of a forest or the grass in a garden.
And the food preferences maintain this clear delineation too. John is a pepperoni pizza traditionalist. Well, Emma prefers pasta, though she says she enjoys a heavily loaded vegetarian pizza, tomatoes, peppers, onions.
And their hobbies push the contrast even further. Let's look at John's weekends.
Okay.
John's life outside of work revolves around listening to classic rock, playing Saturday soccer with his friends, specifically to de-stress and socialize, and watching comedies because he believes laughter is the best medicine.
Very communal.
Very. And Emma's weekends are built around painting as a form of meditation, voraciously reading adventure fiction, and watching animated films for their visually stunning imagination.
If we lay this data out, we see 2 entirely distinct psychological profiles.
Night and day.
John's ecosystem is fundamentally communal, active, and externalized. Soccer is a team sport. Classic rock is often stadium music. Comedies are traditionally enjoyed in a group setting where laughter is contagious.
Right.
Even his preferred food, a traditional pepperoni pizza, is the ultimate shared communal meal. His dog is boisterous and affectionate. John recharges by connecting with the external world.
Whereas Emma's world is almost entirely introspective and aesthetic.
Right.
Painting as meditation is a solitary internal pursuit. Reading adventure fiction is a private cognitive journey. She appreciates animated films, not necessarily for the humor, but for the visual imagination.
She loves nature-focused greens and complex vegetarian pastas.
Her cat is independent and serene. Emma recharges by retreating into an internal, highly curated aesthetic space.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. If I step back and look at the actual topics they're discussing, dogs versus cats, favorite colors, favorite pizza toppings, it feels objectively juvenile.
You think so?
I mean, yeah, this is kindergarten playground chatter. Why do we consider it a sophisticated conversational strategy to ask another adult what their favorite color is? It feels like we're completely regressing.
Well, it's a valid observation, but I think it ignores the mechanical utility of these topics. We rely on these simple categories, food, pets, colors, precisely because they demand zero cognitive overhead.
Zero cognitive overhead, meaning they're easy to process.
They are universally accessible entry points. If Emma tried to bond with John by explaining the complex chemical drying process of her oil paints, she risks alienating him if he doesn't understand chemistry or art.
Right.
But everyone understands a cat. Everyone conceptualizes the color blue.
It levels the playing field so the actual bonding can occur.
It provides a blank canvas for adult interpretation. The transcript demonstrates how you elevate a childlike topic into an adult insight.
How so?
Well, when John says he likes blue, he doesn't stop at the color. He links it to the expanse of a clear sky. Emma links green to the vitality of a forest.
Oh, I see.
And John responds to this by saying, beautifully put, blue sky and green grass, a perfect harmony. They're taking the most mundane data points and using them to construct a shared aesthetic philosophy.
They're using the favorite color question not to learn about wavelengths of light, but to learn how the other person finds beauty in the world. And it allows for a very safe exploration of friction, too. Like when they realize they're on opposite sides of the dog and cat divide, John playfully notes that their differences continue to emerge.
Right. It's a way to acknowledge that they are different people without triggering any real interpersonal conflict.
Which serves as a brilliant psychological bridge into the next phase of the conversation. Because once they've thoroughly mapped out their positive attributes, their shared values, and their aesthetic appreciation of the world, they make a highly deliberate, strategic pivot into the negative.
Yes. They begin detailing their pet peeves.
And this might be the most counterintuitive part of answering, tell me about yourself. Usually we try to present a flawless, purely positive version of ourselves. We want to be entirely agreeable.
We want to be liked.
Exactly. But Emma and John lean into their frustrations. Let's look at John first.
Okay, so John admits he has never acquired a taste for olives. He says the flavor profile fundamentally doesn't appeal to him.
He dislikes extreme heat or spice in his food, clarifying that mild is fine, but extreme is out.
And his major behavioral grievance is that he finds waiting in long queues to be mind-numbing and tedious.
Emma completely mirrors this vulnerability. She enthusiastically agrees about the spicy food, calling an intense heat level an absolute no-go for her.
Right.
She reveals she is staunchly not a morning person, explaining that she fiercely cherishes her sleep and resents early alarms.
And she completely aligns with John on the agony of waiting in lines, asking rhetorically if there's anyone on Earth who actually enjoys a queue.
I look at this like painting. If all your likes, passions, and positive traits are the bright colors on the canvas, your dislikes and pet peeves are the negative space.
Oh, I love that imagery.
Because if you paint a portrait with no shadows, no dark areas, the picture looks flat, artificial, and ultimately unrealistic.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of social psychology, a profile that lacks negative space triggers a subtle alarm in the human brain.
Really? How so?
Well, Irving Goffman wrote extensively about the presentation of self. When someone only presents positive, polished attributes, it feels like a PR brochure rather than a human being.
It feels like a performance.
Exactly. It feels like they're hiding something. The source text itself points this out when John explicitly states that sharing dislikes adds more dimension to your personality.
It proves you aren't an algorithm. It proves you have actual boundaries and friction points with the real world.
Furthermore, sharing a mild grievance taps into the incredibly powerful dynamic of in-group bonding.
Right.
Complaining about a universal annoyance, like standing in a long line at a bank, instantly creates an us versus them alignment.
You're suddenly comrades in arms.
Exactly. It builds rapid camaraderie. You and the person you were speaking with are suddenly on the same team, united against the tedious bureaucracy of the world.
But the curation here is so careful. They're expressing negativity, but it's entirely safe negativity.
Very safe.
Disliking olives or hating your alarm clock shows vulnerability, but it doesn't place any emotional burden on the listener.
Right. You're not trauma dumping.
No, it doesn't cross the line into toxic cynicism. You're showing your human flaws, but keeping the actual stakes incredibly low.
You're demonstrating that you have strong opinions and personal boundaries, which commands respect, but you're choosing boundaries that are universally relatable and entirely harmless to the social dynamic at hand.
Which brings us to the climax of the source material. Emma and John have now spent this entire exercise compiling this massive encyclopedic inventory of their identities.
A huge amount of data.
They've mapped their geography, documented their familial lore, analyzed their aesthetic passions, and curated their mild grievances.
Yeah.
They have this towering monument of personal data.
Right.
And then the transcript pulls the rug out from under the learner.
It introduces the critical constraint.
Exactly. The text explicitly warns against ever actually delivering this massive list when someone asks, "Tell me about yourself."
It essentially says, do not do what we just did.
Which begs the question, if we aren't supposed to read the biography, what was the psychological purpose of compiling it in such excruciating detail?
Well, this is where the transcript moves from a simple vocabulary exercise into a sophisticated behavioral framework.
Okay, lay it out for me.
The point of mapping out every facet of your identity isn't to create a script that you recite verbatim. The point is to take a comprehensive inventory of your internal warehouse.
Oh, I see.
You cannot properly curate an art gallery if you have no idea what paintings are sitting in the vault.
You have to know your own lore before you can summarize it.
Exactly. The central thesis of the transcript is that the answer to "tell me about yourself" must always be dictated by context. The situation demands a specific slice of your identity.
Right.
The text provides clear parameters.
Huh.
If you're in an academic setting or a formal language class, your curation should reflect intellectual curiosity.
So what's the example they use for that?
The example provided is straightforward. Someone says, "I'm in the US and I have a curiosity for learning new things."
Okay, very clean.
It grounds the person geographically and establishes their motive for being in the room.
But if you take that same person and put them in a purely social gathering, like a dinner party, that academic answer sounds stiff and inappropriate.
Yeah, you sound like a robot at a party.
Right. So they go back to the inventory vault and pull out different items. The social example is, "Hi, I'm Emma. I love to paint and listen to music."
You match the inventory to the environment. The source material then synthesizes everything we've discussed into a singular, adaptable formula.
The winning formula.
Yes, it combines the baseline demographic, the emotional anchor, and the strategic pet peeve into one highly approachable package.
So what is Emma's ultimate summation?
She says, "Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a student. I adore cats and pasta, but I'm not a morning person."
Wow, that is remarkably efficient.
3 sentences.
In 3 sentences, she hits every required psychological marker. I'm a student provides the baseline vocation and status.
Yep.
I adore cats, and pasta injects warmth, aesthetic preference, and universal entry points.
Absolutely.
And I'm not a morning person provides the negative space, the mild grievance that invites empathetic bonding.
And this raises the most important conceptual shift for the listener. The goal of answering "tell me about yourself" is not to provide a comprehensive summary of your existence.
You're not delivering a monologue.
No. The introduction is, as the source text explicitly defines it, an invitation. You are simply providing a springboard for the interaction to begin.
You're leaving conversational breadcrumbs. Like if you just give your job title, "Hi, I'm an accountant," you're forcing the other person to do all the heavy lifting to keep the interaction alive.
Right. They have to interrogate you to find an angle.
Oh, do you like numbers? It's brutal. But if you give them the formula, a job, the passion, the mild dislike, you're handing them a menu with 3 distinct options.
You empower the listener. They can choose to ask you about your coursework, they can pivot to discussing their own pets or favorite pasta dishes, or they can commiserate with you about the agony of waking up early.
You've essentially guaranteed that the conversation will flow organically because you provided multiple varied entry points.
Exactly. And the text finishes with a few behavioral directives that cement this approach. Keep the delivery concise, ensure the tone is authentic and friendly, and crucially, offer a genuine smile.
because the nonverbal signaling of the invitation is just as important as the curated data.
A smile neurologically signals safety. It assures the listener that the boundaries you've established are permeable and that the invitation to connect is genuine.
Looking back, the sheer amount of psychological terrain we've covered from this one transcript is staggering.
It really is a goldmine.
We started with the foundational baseline, understanding how the contrast between an invigorating city and a tranquil town signals our tolerance for external stimuli.
Then we examine the narrative power of lineage, exploring how the artistic family or the service-oriented household provides the necessary context to make your current choices feel coherent and grounded.
Right. And then we analyzed the surprisingly profound utility of kindergarten questions, how colors and pets serve as low-stakes proxies for our deeper aesthetic and communal values.
We explored the strategic deployment of the pet peeve to create negative space and foster in-group bonding.
And finally, we broke down the ultimate framework, taking a massive personal inventory only to select 3 specific items for the window display.
It is a comprehensive blueprint for navigating human connection.
So for you listening, the practical application is immediate. The next time you find yourself at a table and someone drops the dreaded "tell me about yourself" prompt, the cognitive freeze doesn't have to happen.
You don't need to panic.
You don't need to summarize your soul. You just need to walk into your mental vault, grab your baseline context, a universally accessible passion, and a mild, relatable grievance. Construct your menu, offer it with a smile, and let the other person choose their own adventure.
It is not an interrogation, it is an invitation.
Beautifully said.
As we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a final concept to consider, one that builds on this idea of the personal inventory vault.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
We have focused entirely on how to construct this curated narrative for the benefit of the person sitting across from you. But consider the internal mechanism at play. I want you to reflect on how your own "tell me about yourself" pitch has evolved over the last 5, 10, or 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Think about the facts, the hobbies, or the pet peeves that you used to consistently pull from your vault, which you no longer mention, and look at the new items that have replaced them.
The things we quietly drop from our own highlight reel.
Because the curation process is not a one-way street. By deciding what to highlight and what to relegate to the shadows, your introduction acts as a mirror.
Right.
It doesn't just tell the world who you are, it reflects who you are actively choosing to become. The narrative you consistently construct for others eventually becomes the architectural framework of your own self-perception. The story you tell others becomes the story you tell yourself.
That completely shifts the weight of the exercise. You aren't just managing someone else's impression of you. You are constantly rewriting your own operating system.
Exactly.
That is an incredible thought to leave on. Thank you for walking through this landscape today.
The pleasure was entirely mine.
Until next time, take some time to audit your inventory vault, figure out what you're keeping in the window display, and remember, the next time your conversational search engine threatens to crash, all you really need is a baseline, a passion, and a mutual disdain for waiting in long lines. We'll see you on the next deep dive. So I want you to just picture the scene for a second. You've just walked into a room.
Oh yeah, we all know this room.
Right. Maybe it's like a neighborhood gathering you were heavily pressured into attending, or perhaps it's a really stark, brightly lit conference room, like 5 minutes before a quarterly review actually starts.
The worst lighting imaginable, always.
Always. And you make eye contact with someone you barely know. You offer a very standard hello. They return the hello. And then the air just completely drops out of the room.
Just a total vacuum.
Exactly. That heavy, suffocating, almost physical silence just takes over. The atmosphere suddenly feels incredibly thick.
Right.
And you're both just standing there, and your internal monologue is just screaming. You're frantically searching your brain for something, literally anything, to say to bridge the gap.
Yeah, it's like standing at the edge of a cliff.
Yes. And the only way across is to, construct a bridge out of a sentence you haven't even thought of yet.
It really is a universally agonizing moment. And, well, it's fascinating how primal that panic actually is when you look at it.
Primal. Like biological.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a binary switch. A microsecond ago, you were just 2 independent organisms existing in a room, entirely unburdened by each other.
Right. Minding your own business.
But the moment you acknowledge each other, you are locked into a social dynamic. So that silence isn't just an absence of noise anymore. From an evolutionary standpoint, that silence is loud.
Huh. Loud how?
It's an absolute demand for interaction. And our brains, they actually perceive the lack of it as an active threat.
Wow, an active threat. I think that primal panic is exactly what we need to tackle in our deep dive today, because we are looking at the fundamental architecture of small talk.
Which is so much more complex than people give it credit for.
Oh, entirely.
Yeah.
Because for so many of us, that moment right after hello isn't just daunting. I mean, it feels like a test we haven't studied for. So, to figure this out, our sources for this exploration include this really interesting instructional dialogue. It was designed by two language educators, Emma and John.
Right, and they've mapped out the precise mechanics, the safe zones, and the major conversational pitfalls of everyday social interactions.
Yeah, but what we are really going to do today is look at the hidden neurobiology, the social psychology, and the underlying mechanisms of why their framework actually works.
Which I think is a crucial distinction to make right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because Emma and John's dialogue, I mean, on the surface, it looks like a simple vocabulary lesson for language learners, just, basic phrases.
Like a textbook script.
Exactly. But if we peel back the layers of what they're doing, they are actually outlining the structural engineering of human connection. They are demonstrating exactly how to build safety.
And we really tend to dismiss small talk, don't we? Like as this useless, frustrating packaging around the quote-unquote real conversations we eventually want to have.
Oh, all the time. We treat it as an annoyance, a hurdle.
Right. But the source material, and really the psychological principles beneath it, establish right away that the ability to navigate these minor, seemingly trivial interactions, that's the master key.
It really is. It dictates the success of our daily interactions. I mean, it opens doors to professional opportunities, community integration, deep friendships, all of it.
So I want to start with a concept the source brings up almost immediately. They refer to small talk as social glue.
Such a great phrase, social glue.
It's very evocative, right? They describe it as the vital substance holding daily interactions together. But I want to dig into the sociology of this.
Let's do it.
Because if I'm standing in line at a coffee shop and I comment on the slow service to the person next to me, I'm not actually conveying any meaningful data.
No, not at all.
So what exactly is this glue made of? If it's not information, what is it?
Well, to understand the glue, we really have to look at a concept in sociolinguistics. It's called phatic communion.
Phatic communion, okay.
Yeah, it was coined by this anthropologist, Bronislaw Malinowski, back in the 1920s. And it basically refers to communication that serves a social function rather than an informational one.
Okay, so it's not about the facts.
Exactly. When you talk to that stranger in the coffee shop line, you aren't exchanging critical, life-altering data. You aren't transferring knowledge.
Right. I'm certainly not passing along the nuclear launch codes while waiting for my iced Americano.
No, thankfully not. What you are actually doing is engaging in a biological safety check.
A safety check.
Yeah. Malinowski observed that for early humans, a stranger was a potential predator or, an enemy tribe member.
So stranger equals danger, basically.
Precisely. So language evolved not just to say, like, hey, there is a tiger in the bushes, but to say, I see you, you see me, and we are not going to kill each other.
Wow. Okay, so the glue is really the process of bridging the gap between two isolated individuals.
And signaling non-hostility. It's an appeasement mechanism. You are literally proving that you are part of the same shared reality, that you understand the basic rules of the tribe.
And that you are safe to be around.
Exactly.
So when I complain about the coffee line taking forever, I'm basically just telling the other person's amygdala to stand down.
That is exactly what is happening neurologically.
I'm communicating that I'm a predictable, socially aware human being.
You are soothing their threat detection system. And importantly, they are soothing yours by responding appropriately.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because if small talk is just this baseline evolutionary safety mechanism, if it's literally just our brains trying to establish that we aren't threats to one another, why do we dread it so much?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. The source notes that this feels incredibly intimidating for language learners and native speakers alike.
It does.
But if it's a survival mechanism, shouldn't it feel totally natural? Like, why does my heart rate spike when I'm stuck in an elevator with a coworker I barely know?
It's a great point. The paradox there really lies in the cognitive load required to perform it.
A cognitive load?
Yeah. The source text points out that the intimidation comes from a lack of practice and, really crucially, not knowing the quote-unquote rules of engagement.
The rules.
When you don't know the rules of a really complex game, stepping onto the field is terrifying. You don't know what constitutes a foul.
You don't know where the boundaries are.
Exactly. So the intimidation isn't because the act of speaking is physically dangerous. It's because the conversational landscape feels unmapped. And humans are deeply, deeply afraid of social rejection.
Because back in the day, social rejection meant death.
Right. A misstep in small talk triggers that same evolutionary alarm. Like, if I say the wrong thing, the tribe will cast me out and I will starve.
That fear of exile. I mean, it sounds so dramatic when we talk about a coffee shop line, but neurologically, social rejection registers in the brain very similarly to physical pain.
Does. The anterior cingulate cortex actually lights up in both scenarios. So the stakes of a bad elevator conversation, they actually feel life or death to our nervous system, even if our logical brain knows it's just, a bit of awkwardness.
Okay, so if the fear comes from not knowing where those out-of-bounds lines are, we really need to map the safe zones.
And our sources do exactly this, which is brilliant.
They really do. They provide a whole geography of safe topics, moving systematically from the most universal macro concepts down to the more immediate and personal.
Right.
So let's start with the most infamous one, the weather.
Oh, yes, the weather.
The source uses examples like, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Or, "I can't believe how much it's raining."
It is arguably the most universally deployed starting point for small talk in human history. And to be fair, it's heavily mocked for being unoriginal.
I mean, I am definitely one of the people who mocks it.
Most people do.
Because isn't opening with the weather just like a white flag of conversational defeat? It feels incredibly cliche.
I get that.
Like, if I point out that it's raining to someone who is currently standing in the rain holding a wet umbrella, I'm just stating the obvious. Does that actually spark a real connection?
Well, I'd argue that mocking the weather as a topic fundamentally misunderstands its utility. We have to look at what the source implies about the absolute genius of its neutrality.
Genius. That's a strong word for looks like rain.
But think about it. The value of talking about the weather has absolutely nothing to do with the meteorological data you are providing. They know it's raining. You know it's raining.
Right, so why say it?
Because weather is the ultimate equalizer. It is a shared, undeniable reality that requires zero prerequisite knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. There's no shared cultural background needed, no socioeconomic alignment required to experience it.
You don't need to know their political affiliation or their income or their hobbies to know they are getting soaked in the exact same rainstorm.
Exactly. It is a very low-stakes test of social connectivity.
I like to think of it like a submarine sending out a sonar ping.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You're just sending out a little acoustic waves to see if there is another friendly vessel in the area willing to ping back. The ping itself contains absolutely no complex data. It just says, are you there? Are you receiving signals?
And how they return that ping tells you everything you need to know about their willingness to interact.
Right.
If you say, terrible rain today, and they just grunt and look at their phone, well, you have your answer.
And you can retreat safely with your dignity totally intact because, hey, you only risked a comment about the sky.
Exactly. But if they say, I know I practically had to swim to the train station, then they have accepted the invitation. They have signaled that they are open to the social glue.
Okay, viewing it as a diagnostic tool rather than like an attempt at profound dialogue, that makes me respect the weather trope a lot more.
It's a synchronization mechanism.
Yeah. And once we've synced up on the macro reality of the sky, the source brings up the second category, which zooms in just a little bit closer to the individual.
Which is the immediate surroundings.
Right. Commenting on the shared physical environment, the examples they use are things like, this is a lovely cafe. Have you been here before?
So we are moving from the sky to the actual room you are currently occupying. It builds on that concept of shared reality, but it localizes it. It requires a bit of observation.
It grounds both people in the present moment. And it definitely feels less abstract than the weather.
It does.
Like when you comment on the weird music playing in a hotel lobby, or the strangely aggressive fluorescent lighting at the DMV.
Oh, the DMV lighting is always a great unifier.
It really is. You are forming this micro-alliance against or in appreciation of the immediate environment.
And it's a very subtle psychological maneuver, too. By focusing your shared attention on an external third object, like the cafe or the music or the lighting, you relieve the pressure of focusing directly on each other.
Because direct face-to-face focus between strangers can feel a bit confrontational.
Absolutely. Triangulating your attention onto the environment diffuses that tension entirely. You're both looking at the problem, or the room, not intensely into each other's eyes.
That leads perfectly into the third category our source provides, food and drink.
A classic.
The example they give is being at a gathering and asking, "Have you tried the pasta? It looks delicious."
So notice the progression here. We've moved from the shared physical space to a shared biological imperative, though it's disguised as culture.
Food and drink are universally safe because eating is just a fundamental human commonality.
Exactly, but discussing it allows for personal preference without deep vulnerability.
And it triggers positive associations, right? When we talk about food, we're essentially talking about sustenance, pleasure, survival.
Very true.
I mean, it's really hard to get into a deeply offensive existential argument about whether the pasta looks good.
Exactly. And furthermore, sharing a meal, or honestly even just discussing the sharing of a meal, has deep evolutionary roots in communal trust. When our ancestors ate together, it meant resources were abundant enough to share. And it meant no one was actively trying to kill anyone else at the table.
Because it's hard to eat and fight at the same time.
Right. So discussing the catering at a work conference taps into that ancient parasympathetic nervous system response. It literally signals safety and communal belonging.
Which brings us to the fourth and final safe category outlined in our text. General entertainment, movies, TV series, books, and music.
Yes.
The examples in the source are, have you seen any good movies recently? Or are you watching that popular new series?
Now, look at how we've progressed. We started with the sky, which is total neutrality. We moved to the room, so shared physical space. Then we moved to food, a shared sensory experience.
And now?
Now we are at entertainment, which is an invitation to share cultural touchstones. It is definitely the deepest of the safe topics.
I sort of see entertainment as a proxy.
A proxy? How do you mean?
Well, I'm asking for a piece of your personality, but I'm giving you plausible deniability. Like, if I ask you what TV show you're watching, I'm indirectly trying to gauge your worldview, right?
Sure.
Your sense of humor, your moral alignments. I'm totally judging your worldview based on whether you like Succession or, Ted Lasso.
That's a very stark contrast.
Right. But if we disagree, we can just say, "Oh, it wasn't really my cup of tea," and move on. No one's core identity is destroyed in that exchange.
That is the crucial function of proxy topics. Entertainment is inherently designed to be consumed and discussed publicly. It is an external object.
So I'm not attacking you, I'm just critiquing the show.
Exactly. You are testing the waters of shared values without probing into their actual private life. It reveals who they are through the lens of fiction or public art, which, as you said, keeps the conversational stakes incredibly manageable.
So we have this really robust map of the safe zones now. We know how to establish baseline safety using the weather, the room, food, and media.
The foundational pillars of small talk.
But navigating any landscape safely isn't just about knowing where the path is.
No, it is not.
It requires knowing exactly where the landmines are hidden, and the source material is incredibly explicit about the out-of-bounds lines.
Yes, the text introduces the concept of the 3 Ps.
The 3 Ps.
These are the 3 topics that must unequivocally be avoided if you want your small talk to survive those preliminary phases.
And they are?
Politics, personal finances, and very private matters.
Okay, I really want to look at the 3 Ps through a structural lens. Bringing up politics during small talk is it's like trying to install a massive, heavy chandelier before the house's foundation has even dried.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
The relationship structure literally cannot bear the weight of that conflict yet. The mortar is still wet.
I think that captures the mechanical failure of bringing up the 3 Ps perfectly. The text simply states that these subjects cause discomfort, but we need to look at the neurobiology of why.
Let's do it. Let's take politics. Why is this such a conversational hand grenade?
Because politics isn't just about, marginal tax rates or zoning laws. It's deeply, deeply tied to our core identities and our fundamental sense of moral, right, and wrong.
Right. It's how we view the world.
Exactly. When you introduce politics to a stranger, you aren't just sharing a casual opinion, you are potentially challenging their entire moral framework.
And the brain does not like that.
Not at all. The brain processes a challenge to deeply held political beliefs the exact same way it processes a physical threat.
So the amygdala activates.
Yes, you trigger a literal fight-or-flight response. The social glue we talked about earlier, it instantly dissolves because you have introduced high-stakes friction before any foundational trust has been established.
You are basically asking for an assessment of loyalty before you've even established that you are friendly.
It's a highly aggressive act, even if it's disguised as a casual conversation starter.
Okay, what about the second P? Personal finances. Asking someone how much money they make or what their rent is or how much their new car cost.
Personal finance triggers something slightly different but equally dangerous. Status anxiety.
Ah, the hierarchy.
Exactly. In any primate species, hierarchy is very dangerous territory. And money in our culture is incredibly loaded. It's tied to concepts of success, power, security, worth.
So by asking about finances, you are forcing a hierarchical comparison.
Right. You are stripping away the nice, egalitarian, neutral ground of the weather or the cafe, and you are forcing the other person to explicitly position themselves either above or below you in a dominance hierarchy.
Which is incredibly uncomfortable for everyone involved. But I have to challenge this slightly.
Go ahead.
What if I'm at a professional networking event?
Okay.
Isn't finding out what someone does for a living and by proxy their financial or corporate status, isn't that the entire point of being in that room? Like, avoiding the topic of work and money there feels completely counterproductive.
That's a fair distinction. In a strictly transactional setting where the overt, agreed-upon goal is business development, the rules do shift slightly. You have a different baseline. But Emma and John's source material is really addressing the baseline of everyday human connection. And honestly, even at a networking event, if you lead immediately with, what's your revenue look like this quarter, before establishing any rapport,
you're going to see an intent.
You will be perceived as a predator, not a partner. You still have to establish that you are a safe human before you can establish that you are a valuable business contact.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You really can't skip the fat at communion, even if you're wearing a suit.
Precisely.
Okay, so the third P, very private matters. The source gives a really specific golden rule regarding this one. It states, and I quote, "It's best to let the other person lead the conversation into more personal territory if they choose to."
Yes. It is fundamentally an opt-in system. This is all about respecting autonomy.
Right, because small talk is an invitation.
Yeah.
It's not a subpoena.
I love that. Exactly. But you cannot force intimacy by dragging a stranger into a deep conversation about their family dynamics, their health issues, or, their recent divorce.
You have to leave the door open, but let them be the one to walk through it.
Yes.
So if I ask a relatively safe question, like, how has your week been? And they reply with just a short, tight, fine. My job isn't to play therapist.
No, absolutely not.
I don't follow up with, are you sure you look exhausted and I noticed you aren't wearing your wedding ring?
Good grief, no. To do so is a massive boundary violation. The private sphere is sacred ground in early social interactions.
Right.
The opt-in system allows the other person to strictly control their level of exposure. If they want to share that they're having a terrible week because, their dog died, they will offer that information.
And if they don't offer it?
If they don't, your job is to remain safely in the realm of the neutral environment. Pushing for unearned intimacy actually creates massive distrust. It does the opposite of bonding.
Okay, so we've mapped the safe zones. We know the weather, the room, food, media, and we've identified the landmines of the 3 Ps.
Politics, finances, privacy.
But here is where we hit the mechanical breakdown that I think most people really struggle with.
The dreaded stall.
Exactly. Let's say you've successfully navigated the safe topics.
Yeah.
You've avoided politics. You've sent out the sonar ping. And then the conversation just stalls out after 2 sentences.
It's the dead end. The engine just dies on the runway.
You ask a safe question, they answer safely, and suddenly you are right back to that terrifying heavy silence we started this entire discussion with.
It's so frustrating when that happens.
So how do we engineer the conversation to prevent that structural collapse?
Well, the source provides a very specific mechanical fix for this: the deployment of open-ended questions.
Okay.
It states that the structural key to keeping a conversation going is to ask questions that simply cannot be answered with a yes or no.
Right. But I want to look at the cognitive load of this rather than just the basic grammar lesson. I mean, our listeners likely know the difference between an open and closed question.
Sure.
The source compares, do you like sports? Which is closed to, what do you like to do on the weekends? Which is open. But what is actually happening in the dynamic between the two speakers when you shift from close to open?
That's the fascinating part. You are shifting the conversational burden.
The burden.
Yes. A closed question like, do you like sports, is basically a binary data request. It offers exactly two exits, yes or no.
And if they say no, the topic is instantly exhausted. The brick wall has been hit.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even if they say yes, it doesn't naturally propel the dialogue forward. The cognitive burden immediately returns to you, the speaker, to invent the next topic.
Oh, right, because they just said yes, and now I have to be like, cool, what team?
Right, you have to constantly interrogate them to keep it alive.
It's exhausting for both parties. It's like hitting a tennis ball against a brick wall. It just bounces back and stops dead.
But an open-ended question using what, how, or why changes the entire architecture.
Because it's like a tennis rally.
Yes. Asking, what do you like to do on the weekends, demands a narrative. It forces the other person to paint a picture, to provide details, to synthesize their thoughts.
But wait, doesn't that inherently cause anxiety for the person answering?
How do you mean?
Well, if I'm, say, an introvert, and you hit me with a broad, open-ended question, I suddenly have to do all the work. You've handed me a massive blank canvas and said, paint. That can feel really overwhelming compared to just answering yes or no.
That is definitely the friction point, yes. Open-ended questions do demand more cognitive effort from the respondent, but they also offer them control.
Control over what?
Over the narrative. They allow the respondent to choose which thread of their life they want to present to you. It gives them the agency to steer the conversation toward a topic they are comfortable with.
Oh, I see. If you ask what I do on weekends, I don't have to talk about my stressful family. I can just talk about gardening.
Exactly. And from a structural standpoint, it provides you, the listener, with multiple data points or hooks that you can then grab onto to keep the momentum going.
Which brings us to the crucial second half of this mechanic, active listening.
Yes. Because asking a brilliant, open-ended question is utterly useless if you aren't actually processing the narrative they give you.
Active listening is the actual engine of the conversation, isn't it?
It really is. The text gives a great scenario. If someone answers your open-ended question by mentioning they enjoy reading, your job isn't to just say cool and then immediately launch into your own prepared anecdote about a book.
Right, because that just proves you were waiting for your turn to speak. You weren't listening, you were just reloading.
Exactly. Active listening means taking the specific data they just provided and using it to formulate your next inquiry. So the text suggests replying with, oh, that's interesting. What's the best book you've read this year?
I love the mechanics of that follow-up.
Yeah.
It acts as like a neurohack.
A neurohack.
Yeah. First, it proves to their brain that you are a safe, attentive entity because you caught a specific detail. You remember they said reading.
Yep.
And second, it validates them. It essentially says, your interest has value to me. Please elaborate.
And that validation actually triggers the release of oxytocin in the speaker.
Really? The bonding hormone.
Yes. When someone feels genuinely heard, their physiological defenses drop. Furthermore, active listening actually reduces your own cognitive load.
Because you aren't scrambling to invent a new topic.
Exactly. You don't have to panic about what to say next because you are simply following the trail of breadcrumbs the other person is already leaving for you.
But that raises a bit of a dilemma for me.
Okay, what's that?
If I'm just following their breadcrumbs and asking more and more open-ended questions based on their answers, aren't I just interrogating them? Like, how do I participate without making them feel like they're on a witness stand being cross-examined?
This is where the economics of conversation really come into play. A conversation absolutely cannot survive as a one-way extraction of information.
Right.
The source makes it very clear. It must become a two-way street. You have to engage in reciprocity.
The necessity of sharing. So if we look at this through the lens of game theory, specifically, tit-for-tat cooperation only works if both parties are contributing equally to the pot.
Exactly.
If you only ask questions, you are placing the entire burden of content creation on the other person. You are hoarding your own vulnerability while demanding theirs.
Which feels terrible for the other person. Sharing a little bit about yourself is an act of conversational generosity. You have to give them material to work with too.
And the text illustrates this beautifully by contrasting a failed response with a successful one.
It does. Let's say someone asks you, what did you do on the weekend? And you reply with just one word, nothing.
Oh, brutal.
You have essentially committed conversational sabotage.
You've taken the tennis ball and just popped it with a knife. By saying nothing, you are signaling a complete refusal to participate in the exchange of the social glue.
You are withdrawing your contribution from the communal pot.
But the successful alternative that text offers provides a real template for how to contribute safely. Instead of nothing, you reply, "I went for a walk and watched a movie. It was very relaxing."
Let's look at the surface area of that response because it's brilliant.
Okay.
You have provided 3 distinct hooks in one short sentence.
Hook 1. I went for a walk, so they can ask where or if you like the outdoors.
Right. Hook 2. And watched a movie. They can ask what genre, what film.
In hook 3, he was very relaxing. They can relate to the emotional state of needing rest after a long week.
Exactly. You have generously provided multiple paths forward for the other person. You are doing the architectural work to keep the bridge stable.
But I need to challenge the vulnerability aspect of this sharing.
Sure. Go ahead.
Because how do you balance sharing about yourself without accidentally violating that private matters rule we discussed earlier? Because sharing is a loaded word.
It is.
For some people, sharing means unloading their childhood trauma. How do we share without trauma dumping on a stranger in the coffee line?
The distinction is vital, and it ties directly back to our map of the safe zones. In the context of small talk, sharing is strictly limited to the shallow end of the pool.
The shallow end.
Right. Look at the text example again. I went for a walk and watched a movie. That is a personal experience, yes, but it is entirely superficial. It involves the physical environment and general entertainment, safe zones.
So you are offering your experience of the safe topics, not your deepest fears.
Exactly.
You aren't saying, I went for a walk and cried about my impending divorce. You were saying, I went for a walk in the botanical gardens.
Correct. You are providing enough surface area for the other person to connect with your humanity, but you are not asking them to carry the heavy emotional weight of your private life. It is low-stakes exposure.
Okay, we've covered a lot of deep theory here. We understand phatic communion, the evolutionary safety of the weather, avoiding the amygdala hijack of the 3 Ps, the cognitive shift of open-ended questions, and the game theory of the two-way street.
That's the whole framework.
But theory is pretty useless without application. So let's look at how Emma and John's dialogue actually puts these pieces together in a real-world scenario.
The source presents a role-play scenario of 2 strangers, John and Emma, waiting in line for a movie. And it is a perfect microcosm of literally everything we've discussed.
Okay, let's observe this interaction organically and see how they negotiate boundaries and shared space. So John initiates the sequence. He says, wow, it's quite a long queue tonight. This film must be popular.
So let's analyze the context. The queue is a fascinating psychological space. You are trapped in close proximity to strangers, your forward momentum is totally stalled, and you are forced to wait.
The worst.
But notice John doesn't ask Emma a personal question. He uses the immediate environment, the long queue, to establish a shared reality.
He is saying, we are both experiencing this mild inconvenience together.
Yes, it is undeniable, completely neutral, and it triangulates their attention away from each other and onto the line.
And he doesn't wait for her to awkwardly validate that observation. He immediately follows it with a hook. He says, are you excited to see it?
Right, he pivots seamlessly from the shared physical space to category 4, general entertainment. He invites her to share an opinion on the movie they are both ostensibly there to see.
And Emma's response is where the two-way street really activates. She says, yes, I am. I've heard great things about it. I love a good comedy. What about you?
Masterful. She validates his premise. She shares a personal but totally safe preference. She loves comedy. And then she immediately returns the volley.
She takes the cognitive burden right off John by asking, what about you? This is the tit-for-tat cooperation in action.
Exactly. And John catches the hook. He says, me too. I think we could all use a good laugh. The lead actor was brilliant in his last movie. Did you happen to see it?
So he is actively listening. He agrees with the comedy angle, and he expands the entertainment topic.
He's keeping the rally going.
But then we reach the most critical part of this entire scenario, because the interaction has to end eventually, right?
It does.
Emma replies, I didn't, but I'll add it to my list. Oh, it looks like the line is moving. Well, it was nice chatting with you. Enjoy the movie.
The graceful exit.
I want to spend some real time on this because I think the fear of not knowing how to end a conversation is exactly what prevents people from starting one in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. The trap of the endless conversation.
Right. If I don't know how to get off the ride, I'm just not going to get on.
It's a very real social anxiety. If small talk doesn't have a clear, graceful endpoint, it ceases to be a low-stakes interaction and rapidly becomes a hostage situation.
Yes.
The brilliance of Emma's exit is that she depersonalizes it entirely.
Right. She ties the exit to a shift in the physical environment. The line is moving.
Exactly. By blaming the environment, she removes any potential sting of rejection.
She isn't saying, I am incredibly bored of you and I wish to stop speaking immediately.
No. She is saying, the parameters of our shared physical space have changed, requiring my attention elsewhere, so our interaction must naturally conclude.
And she seals it with a positive directive. Enjoy the movie.
Which is so important.
It retroactively frames the entire interaction as a transient, pleasant moment. It proves that the small talk was exactly what it was meant to be.
A temporary bridge of social glue.
Not a lifelong commitment.
Uh-huh.
And it releases both parties back into their individual anonymity safely.
It is the absolute perfect dissolution of that temporary alliance.
Now, we've analyzed the script. We have the vocabulary. But there is a massive caveat to all of this.
What's that?
The words are only the software. They have to run on the hardware of your physical body.
Ah, yes, the nonverbal.
Like if I approach someone, cross my arms tightly, stare at the floor and mumble, "What do you like to do on the weekends?" in a flat monotone. The brilliance of the open-ended question is completely irrelevant. The interaction will fail.
Miserably.
So how does the source address this?
The source addresses this physical reality head-on. The ultimate advice provided by the text isn't linguistic at all. It's about physical delivery.
It says, be confident and smile. A friendly expression makes you much more approachable.
Right. And I want to look at the neurobiology of the smile here, because it's not just about looking pretty or polite. It's an active communicative tool.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, before you even articulate a single syllable about the weather, your physical presence is broadcasting a massive amount of data to the other person's nervous system.
Because of that threat detection we talked about earlier.
Yes. A genuine smile is the ultimate evolutionary appeasement signal.
It's the visual equivalent of putting your hands up to show you don't have a weapon.
Exactly. And it engages the mirror neuron system in the brain of the person looking at you.
The mirror neurons.
Yeah. When you smile warmly, the motor pathways in their brain that control their own smiling muscles actually stimulate.
Wait, really?
Yes. You are neurologically prompting them to feel the emotion associated with the expression you are projecting. You are actively lowering their barrier to entry before the verbal conversation even begins. Wow. But I have to push back for our listeners who suffer from social anxiety.
Of course.
Because telling someone who is internally panicking to just be confident and smile feels, frankly, incredibly dismissive.
It does sound like terrible advice when you're anxious.
Right. It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just, run faster.
Mm-hmm.
If I am terrified of this interaction, a fake plastered-on smile is going to look like a grimace.
A very unsettling grimace.
And it will probably trigger their threat detection even more. So how does one realistically embody this if they are anxious?
That is a very valid critique of the whole fake it till you make it culture.
Yeah.
But if we look closely at the text's intent, the goal is not to perform a booming theatrical extroversion.
Okay.
The text pairs the smile with the concept of being approachable. You don't need to exude rock star confidence. You just need to arrange your features to signal non-hostility.
So it's less about projecting aggressive charisma and more about just making sure the open for business sign in your window is turned on rather than the go away sign. That is a great way to think about it. A slight softening of the eyes, uncrossing your arms, turning your torso slightly toward the person.
Just microsignals.
Exactly. Micro signals of approachability that don't require you to fake a booming personality that you don't have.
And the source provides the ultimate antidote to that internal panic, too. It insists that this is a practice. It says, the more you do it, the more natural it will feel.
It frames social interaction not as an innate magical talent bestowed upon extroverts at birth, but as a physical muscle. It is an acquired skill subject to the laws of neuroplasticity.
The myelination of neural pathways.
Yes. When you first try to actively listen, formulate an open-ended question, and monitor your body language all at once, it feels incredibly clunky.
The cognitive load is just maxed out.
Yeah.
You are hyper-aware of the gears grinding in your head.
But through repetition, those specific neural circuits become coded in myelin, which allows the electrical signals to travel faster and more efficiently.
So the mechanics move from your conscious, effortful brain into your subconscious processing.
The cognitive load drops.
You stop actively thinking about the rules of the game, and you just start playing. You learn to trust the structural architecture of the conversation.
Which finally allows you to relax and actually connect with the human being standing in front of you. You transition from surviving the interaction to actually experiencing it.
Wow. This has been a phenomenal unpacking of the hidden depths of everyday interaction.
It really is a deep topic once you get past the surface.
Let's trace the arc of what we've discovered today. We started by redefining small talk. It isn't annoying filler. It is the vital evolutionary social glue of phatic communion, the mechanism we use to signal safety and shared reality to the people around us.
We mapped the geography of that shared reality, learning exactly how to use the weather, our immediate environment, food, and entertainment as low-stakes proxies to test the waters of connection without triggering vulnerability.
We identified the conversational landmines, understanding why the 3 Ps, politics, personal finances, and very private matters, cause an immediate amygdala hijack by introducing profound moral conflict, status anxiety, and boundary violations before the relationship structure can handle it.
We explored the cognitive mechanics of continuity, discovering how open-ended questions shift the conversational burden and demand narrative, while active listening provides validation and the necessary hooks for the next phase.
We looked at the game theory of the two-way street, recognizing that sharing light, safe details about ourselves is an act of conversational generosity necessary to prevent an interrogation.
We watched these rules play out perfectly in a movie cue, highlighting the absolute psychological necessity of the graceful exit to provide a safety net.
And finally, we grounded it all in the physical reality of the body, understanding how a simple expression of approachability utilizes mirror neurons to bypass verbal defenses, and how treating these skills as a neuroplastic muscle can transform anxiety into subconscious competence.
It's quite a toolkit.
The mechanics are all there. Mastering these seemingly trivial rules fundamentally alters how you navigate the world. You are no longer a passive victim of the heavy, awkward silence. You are the architect capable of building a bridge across it.
Absolutely.
So I want to leave you with a final challenge. Think back to that terrifying, suffocating silence we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive. The cliff edge.
The panic moment.
The next time you find yourself standing in a long line or waiting in that stark conference room for a meeting to start and that heavy silence drops, notice your instinct to panic. Notice your instinct to reach for your phone to hide from the social demand.
We all do it.
Interrupt that instinct. Look up. Look at the shared physical environment around you. What is the one open-ended question you will use to lay down some phatic communion, soothe the evolutionary threat system, and build a small bridge with the person next to you?